I knew something was off when Gavin, the same VP who'd once thanked me for single-handedly salvaging the Denver rollout, refused to make eye contact as I approached the gate. My badge was clipped to my blouse. I had the itinerary. I'd handled every damn piece of logistics for this Hawaii retreat down to the gluten-free macadamia cookies in the welcome baskets. But he stood there like a TSA agent with a superiority complex and said the words with a smirk that tasted like pennies in my mouth. "No room for you." I blinked. What? The flight's at capacity. We had to make some priority decisions. You weren't on the final manifest. His tone could have frozen lava. Behind him, our C-suite posse boarded one by one. Cocktails of spray tans and blazers pretending they knew which end of the contract held the teeth. One even gave me a pity smile, like I was the office dog that had peed on the guest rug. Not one of them, not even Alexis from finance, whose entire vendor flow I rebuilt, said a word. Just slid by, wheeling their away suitcases, pretending this wasn't a hit job dressed in corporate logistics. I could have made a scene. Could have pulled rank, recited the clause numbers I wrote from memory, hell, even called the client CEO myself. God knows he owed me for that 2022 clause rework. But I didn't. Because they weren't just removing me from a flight. They were erasing me from the photo. And I don't beg to be photoshopped back in. So I stepped aside, heels clicking once on the tile like a punctuation mark. Found a seat near the gate trash can. Ignored the nervous glances from the intern they did bring instead of me, Brenda, who once called an MSA a Microsoft Access, and pulled out my phone. No shaking hands. No deep breaths. Just one quiet message to the man who mattered more than the whole retreat combined. Hey, they left me behind. If you still want clarity on Section 9.2, I'm reachable. I hit send. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Then nothing. Then a reply. Let me check something. My lips didn't move, but if you'd held a mirror up to my face, you'd see it. That kind of smile people wear before a fire starts. Because Gavin and his little wine-sipping parade had forgotten something fatal. Section 9.2 wasn't just a delivery clause. It was the gatekeeper. And I wrote it. By the way, if you're still listening and haven't hit subscribe, please do. 97% of people don't. But it really fuels the team to keep telling these stories the way they deserve to be told. Like a sub, it means everything to us. Alright, back to the mess at the gate. As the flight began boarding, I watched them disappear one by one. Gavin didn't even glance back. Just pulled out his sunglasses like he was starring in his own resort ad. That was fine. Because while he was boarding a plane, I was watching a contract take off without him. And the seat he stole? It was the lifeboat. The palm trees were swaying like they'd been hired to perform. Ukulele music piped through hidden speakers near the infinity pool. And Gavin stood under a fake tiki torch, holding a mango cocktail with a wedge of pineapple stabbed onto the rim like it owed him money. I wasn't there, obviously. But I'd built the itinerary, picked the damn venue. Even wrote the icebreaker script that was now being butchered in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, raising his glass like he was announcing an Oscar instead of a service agreement renewal. "It's my pleasure to welcome our esteemed partners at Bearing Klein to Paradise." He paused, grinning like an idiot. "Special thanks to CEO, Carver." He said it like it was French. Or is it Carvier? Haha, someone correct me. The client's CEO, Michael Carver, a man whose handshake feels like a contract being signed, just stared at him. No esmail. No chaquel. Nothing but the kind of silence that makes interns flinch and procurement officers start rechecking clause margins. Then came the moment. Gavin, desperate to claw back some dignity, waved over one of the assistants and held up the welcome packet. "And of course, we've prepared a custom briefing deck highlighting deliverables and roadmap progress. Can someone hand these out?" He might as well have handed out expired coupons. The deck, bless the man, was version 3.1. I'd already replaced it with version 5.2 3 weeks ago, after the Sienna data integration retimeline. I knew it because I was the one who caught that the forecasting model was off by $1.8 million and fixed it before the client noticed. That fix. Not in this deck. Just outdated graphs, placeholder language, and the same old Q2, TBD bullet that had nearly cost us the contract last year. Carver flipped through 3 slides before handing it to his COO with a look that said, Tell me this is a joke. She didn't laugh. Instead, she tilted her head and tapped a nail against the corner of one slide. Quick question, Gavin. Regarding Section 9.2, has the preliminary inspection window been rescheduled, or are we still assuming original site availability? You could hear the ice melt in Gavin's drink. He stalled, took a gulp of mango syrup like it was going to help him remember something he never knew in the first place. Right. Section 9.2. The inspection clause. That's been addressed. Internally, our team is handling all site-side engagement through our ops channels. The COO blinked. You mean Claire? Her tone was neutral, but I know neutral. It's where trust goes to wait before walking out the door. Gavin smiled. Exactly. She's looped in. Carver leaned forward. Because last I heard, Claire wasn't on the flight. Something about a mix-up. Gavin's face twitched. Barely. But enough. And in that moment, surrounded by orchids, luxury name tags, and fake lace draped like trophies around necks that hadn't earned them, the doubt started blooming. Small but viral. The kind of doubt that infects boardrooms and spreads through email threads like mold in a server room. Because Section 9.2 wasn't just a sentence. It was a landmine with a smile on it. And Gavin had just stepped on it in flip-flops. My apartment was silent except for the hiss of the radiator and the occasional creak from the upstairs neighbor who apparently tap-danced in combat boots. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, nursing a mug of coffee that had gone cold twice because I'd been too focused watching the retreat unfold through company Slack updates and LinkedIn photos like a war zone I'd been exiled from. Everyone looked sunburned, overdressed, and slightly confused, especially Gavin. His smile in those pictures had started to shift. Tighter. Less victory lap. More what did we forget? The answer, of course, was me. At 9:42 a.m., my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Out-of-state area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Figured it'd be another internal grovel. But something told me this wasn't from my side. Claire speaking. A pause. Then a voice. Crisp, a little unsure, maybe mid-20s. Claire. This is Jaya, junior associate at Kellerman and Stone. I work under Brian Wu, legal for Baring Klein. I stayed quiet. She cleared her throat. Our CEO asked me to reach out directly. He says there's a clause in the MSA, Section 9.2, that's giving us some interpretive friction. I took a sip. Still cold. Friction. Yes, ma'am. Apparently the VP on-site assured us everything was proceeding as planned, but after reviewing the language, the CEO believes it's intentionally layered. That word hung in the air. Intentionally layered. I didn't smile. Not yet. Do you have the contract in front of you? I asked. Ido. Good. Scroll to page 112. Footnote B under Section 9.2. The part that reads, Site inspection deliverables shall be tied to phase compliance, contingent upon third-party validation unless deferred by mutual acknowledgement. Got it. That's the string. Now follow it to Appendix D. There's a nested condition under schedule alignment. Do you see the phrase delivery sequence optionality? Yes. That was my insertion. That phrase is why the entire MSA is currently in limbo. Jaya went quiet. I let the silence breathe. Not for drama. For effect. You can interpret that as either A. The vendor has full autonomy to reorder inspection timing if dependencies shift, which we outlined in the Sienna memo, which Gavin never read, or B. The client must pause engagement until formal mutual acknowledgement occurs. Guess which one I briefed Carver on personally last year? B. I finally smiled. Correct. She exhaled. Mr. Carver wanted me to ask if you'd be willing to review our upcoming compliance brief. Privately, he said, and I'm quoting, she's the one who buried the gold. If we want to mine this thing, she needs to draw us the map. There it was. Not validation. Something better. Recognition without groveling. A hand reaching across the lines. Not from desperation, but from respect. Gavin had burned the bridge. But Carver? He'd flown a helicopter to the other side. I'll review the brief, I said calmly. Send it to the Proton address on file. And compensation? I didn't answer that part. I didn't need to. She'd learned soon enough that consulting at this level wasn't billed by the hour. It was priced by the mistake you avoided making. When the call ended, I sat there for a while, staring at the contract on my screen. I'd built it like a puzzle no one else could finish without seeing the picture on the box. Gavin thought he'd left me behind. But I had the box. The breakfast briefing was supposed to be casual. Tropical fruit platters, white linens, polite laughter echoing against the sound of waves lapping a manicured shoreline. Gavin showed up in a linen shirt 2 sizes too tight, wearing aviators indoors and calling it island leadership. Most of the execs were nursing hangovers behind dark glasses, but Michael Carver wasn't. He sat upright, plate untouched, watching Gavin the way a lion watches a squirrel trying to explain calculus. The table fell quiet halfway, through the pineapple mimosas. "So," Carver said, dabbing the corner of his mouth with a cloth napkin, "tell me about site inspection compliance." Gavin blinked. Which portion specifically?" "Section 9.2. Gavin paused. His smile didn't quite die, but it flickered, like a blown fuse in a cheap motel. "We're fully aligned with standard procedure," he said too quickly. "Our internal team has reviewed deliverables, and we're tracking toward." "I didn't ask about internal procedure," Carver cut in. "I asked about site inspection compliance. Based on 9.2 stipulations." Gavin laughed, weak, reflexive. "Right, well, we interpreted that section as flexible. Non-binding. It was clearly designed for optional sequence adjustment, so we deprioritized it in favor of the accelerated rollout. No red flags." Carver set his fork down. Slowly. "So you didn't think that section was material?" "No," Gavin replied, tone dipping into condescension. "It read like placeholder language to us. Nothing actionable. Frankly, I think it's been overemphasized." Carver tapped his finger on the table once. "Then why?" he said evenly. "Was it bolded in the MSA?" Gavin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Because I had bolded it, annotated it, and briefed Carver's team on it in person 12 months ago. In the glass conference room where Gavin was too busy ordering a salad with extra avocado to attend. The clause was the linchpin of our entire sequence, tied to a compliance incentive clause that triggered an automatic fee escalation if site inspections weren't acknowledged in mutual order. Every lawyer in that room knew it. So did the procurement team. So did the CFO, who had just stopped buttering his toast. Carver leaned back in his chair. "Who wrote that clause, Gavin?" "Claire," he muttered finally. "And where is Claire right now?" Gavin coughed into his fist. "There was a seating issue. At the gate." A beat. Then the COO, who hadn't spoken all morning, set her orange juice down and said quietly, "Get her on a call. Now." Gavin nodded slowly. "Of course. I'll reach out." "Not just reach out," Carver added. "Loop her in. Or this MSA doesn't move another inch." The music didn't stop. The servers kept pouring coffee, but you could feel the room shift, like a fault line quietly widening under a concrete floor. Gavin adjusted his collar. His mask was still on, but it had a visible dent now. And the only person who could fix it wasn't at breakfast. The first call came in at 7:08 a.m., then 7:09, then 7:12, each from a slightly different extension. Gavin's assistant, internal counsel, someone from client ops, who I hadn't heard from since they tried to onboard me to a SharePoint site that crashed every time I uploaded anything heavier than a JPEG. They were panicking now. You could smell it through the screen. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to be cruel, God, no. I'm not Gavin. I didn't need a stage or a slap or a mic drop. I just needed silence. And space. The kind of space they never gave me when I was working 12-hour days, trying to reverse engineer their laziness into something a Fortune 100 client could actually trust. Instead, I lit a candle. Hazelnut, with a hint of smoke. Sat at my desk in an old hoodie with my hair tied up, glasses on, and opened the draft of a white paper I'd been sketching for 3 months. Not for them. For someone else. Another firm. One who'd reached out quietly after a keynote I gave last year. "If you ever think about a change, we'd love to talk." I hadn't answered then. But I'd saved the email. The phone rang again, same number. I let it ring. and ring. Until it stopped. Then the voicemail hit. Hi Claire, this is Meredith from Legal. I'm calling on behalf of Executive. Things have escalated significantly on site. The client is requesting written clarification regarding Section 9.2, and they've declined to move forward without your direct input. Please call us back as soon as possible. This is getting serious. Serious. Funny how it's only serious when they need you. Not when they cut your budget, or rerouted your flights without notice, or deleted your annotations from the MSA draft because the formatting looked messy. Not when they accidentally dropped your name from the retreat roster and told everyone you'd opted out. Serious meant, now you're useful again. Serious meant, we don't know what you know, and that's terrifying. I forwarded the voicemail to a folder labeled Missing Persons. That's where I kept all the receipts. Not for revenge. For clarity. Then I kept writing. Paragraph after paragraph about real-time compliance models, scalable auditing protocols, and the difference between procedural enforcement and contractual bluffing. Things Gavin would never understand because he thought big words replaced substance. By noon, the draft was done. I attached it to an email, typed out a short note. Thought this might interest you. Let me know if it aligns with what you're building, and hit send. My phone vibrated again. This time it was Gavin himself. I didn't pick up. Because once you realize the only reason they valued you was proximity, the smartest move you can make is distance. Let them sit in a 5-star resort and sweat through their suits. I had better things to build. The emergency call was scheduled for 4:30 p.m. Hawaii time, which meant I was still in my robe on a gray-skied morning in Columbus when it happened. I wasn't on the call, of course. But I didn't need to be. I knew exactly how it would go. These people, the ones who dismissed nuance as noise, had finally walked into a room built on nuance, and were now trying to hold up a collapsing roof with beach umbrellas. It started polite. They always do. Thank you all for hopping on so quickly, said someone from procurement. Probably that sharp one with the glasses who always flagged misaligned delivery dates with unsettling accuracy. We've reviewed Section 9.2 in light of yesterday's breakfast discussion, and there's been some internal confusion regarding execution sequencing. Internal confusion. Corporate for someone's about to bleed, and it ain't gonna be us. Gavin tried to smooth it over, no doubt. I can picture him gesturing wildly over speakerphone, pacing in a suite he didn't earn, shirt sticking to his back. We're absolutely aligned on execution, he probably said. Our team has been handling all back-end prep. The clause was never meant to hinder implementation, it's just boilerplate. That's when the client CEO stepped in. I was briefed on this clause in detail last year, Carver said, combat clipped. And nothing about it struck me as boilerplate. It was emphasized, bolded, in fact, and presented to us as a mutual checkpoint to ensure site readiness. Has that changed? Another pause. Gavin probably flinched. The client's general counsel cleared her throat. We've consulted our internal interpretation team, she said, her tone pure glass. The language is ambiguous. Intentionally, I'd say. The phrase delivery sequence optionality carries dual implications, both of which shift liability depending on acknowledgement timing. I didn't draft that language, Gavin mumbled. A crack in the mask. We know, she replied. Silence. Then Carver, voice firmer now. Let's make it simple. We're pausing forward action on the MSA until the original drafter of Section 9.2 clarifies the interpretation. No new signatures. No ajusted timelines. No rollout commitments. Until she speaks, this deal doesn't move. Procurement murmured agreement. Legal was silent. And in that quiet, the shift happened. Power didn't change hands. It was simply remembered. I hadn't asked for revenge. Hadn't plotted or sabotaged or pulled a single string. I'd just stood still long enough for the floor under Gavin to give out. Gravity did the rest. Back on my end, the notifications started lighting up. Internal ping after internal ping. My old director. Then HR. Then legal again. But I didn't answer. I was still sipping coffee, scrolling through a proposal draft from the firm I'd sent the white paper to. They liked it. Wanted to talk. Somewhere in paradise. Gavin was watching his influence slide off a plate like day-old sashimi. And all I had to do was let the contract speak for itself. Because when you bury the landmines, you don't need to yell. You just wait for someone arrogant enough to think the ground is safe. The call came in at 11:52 p.m. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up without a word. Claire. Meredith from internal legal sounded like she'd been sleeping under her desk or crying in a resort bathroom stall. Her voice was brittle, polite, desperate. Thanks for taking the call. I didn't say anything. Just sipped my tea and waited. We'd really appreciate your input on the MSA matter. There's been significant confusion, misinterpretation, and we believe you're best positioned to clarify the client's concerns, especially around the 9.2 sequencing language. I set the mug down and spoke evenly. You need me to rewrite the delivery matrix? Yes. In plain terms. And this is because the VP who removed me from the retreat decided that footnotes were too academic. A pause. Then, he may have underestimated the legal binding strength of the footnote structure, yes. Of course he did. Gavin thought formatting was a cosmetic decision. The man used italics like glitter glue. I leaned back in my chair. All right. I'll do it. But not as staff. As a consultant. Independent. You'll route it through legal and finance as external subject matter contracting. That's fine, Meredith said too quickly. Triple my prior compensation rate. Another pause. I could almost hear her checking her budget spreadsheet in real time. Understood. And 2 things, I added. 1. I won't be reporting to Gavin. Not now. Not ever. And 2. When the updated language is presented to the client, I'll be the one delivering it. Silence. Not shocked silence, resigned. Legal didn't care about pride. They cared about contracts. About compliance. About fallout prevention. Yes, she said. That's acceptable. And I want it in writing by morning. You'll have it in an hour. Good. I'll start the revisions once the paperwork hits my inbox. I ended the call. No goodbyes. Then I opened a new doc. Titled it MSA_9.2_restructured_final_author_Claire. And I began rewriting the language not just with clarity, but with surgical precision, explicit trigger dates, delivery dependencies that favored client-side veto, and enforceable terms that restored the guardrails Gavin had sloppily bulldozed. By the time the clock hit 2:13 a.m., I'd finished. I saved the document, drafted an executive summary in plain English, and scheduled both to send at 6 a.m. sharp, to legal, to procurement, and to Carver's office. Not Gavin. Never Gavin. My rate was triple now, but the cost of removing me? It had already gone exponential. The room was dressed for diplomacy, chilled carafes of cucumber water, chairs spaced just far enough to suggest neutrality, not conflict. The air conditioning was aggressive, but no one looked comfortable. Gavin sat at the far end of the table, posture too straight, jaw too tight, wearing the same linen suit he'd sweated through during his first failed pitch. Legal sat to his left, whispering in quick bursts. Our board observers flanked the room in their polished silence, eyes flicking from tablet to contract printout, from Gavin to the door. And then that door opened. I stepped in quietly, visitor badge clipped to my blazer, laptop under one arm, hard copy folder in the other. No entourage. No theatrics. Just me. And silence. The kind of silence that sharpens everything. Gavin looked up and froze. Not a word left his mouth. His eyes darted to Meredith, who didn't even blink. The board chair straightened, recognizing the name on the badge. And across the table, Michael Carver gave a slight nod. Not warm. Not cool. Just precise. He tapped a finger once against the glass tabletop. She's the only reason we're not terminating today. That was it. No preamble. No introduction. Just a line of truth dropped like a weight in water. I moved to the open seat at the end, opposite Gavin. Sat down, set my folder on the table, and waited. Carver turned to Gavin without shifting tone. You told us Claire had opted out of the retreat. That she wasn't integral to the delivery phase. You dismissed 9.2 as clerical padding. Gavin opened his mouth. Closed it. The sweat on his upper lip betrayed him before his voice could. Meredith spoke next. Claire's updated brief was delivered this morning. It includes restructured sequencing language, clarified dependencies, and site-specific compliance triggers. In short, it makes the MSA usable again. Carver gestured to his COO, who slid a clean printout across the table toward their general counsel. We reviewed the new terms. They're robust, fair, and enforceable. This, he tapped the document, is what we signed up for. One of the board observers leaned forward. Are we to understand Ms. Halstead will be advising client side going forward? I met his gaze directly. No. I'm consulting independently, but I'll remain on retainer for any interpretation or future revisions. Carver gave the faintest smile. Smart. Gavin finally spoke. This wasn't authorized. She didn't clear this through the proper internal. Stop, said Meredith. Not loudly, but with that certain legal finality that always means someone's already dead. They just haven't hit the floor yet. The board chair folded his hands. It appears Claire's authority on this matter is not only relevant, it's the only reason this deal is intact. So I'd advise we stop pretending otherwise. Gavin slumped. His face said everything. He wasn't surprised. Just cornered. Carver stood, adjusting his cufflinks like he'd already mentally moved on. Meeting adjourned, he said. Unless someone else would like to explain why they intentionally sidelined the only person who understood what we were buying. No one did. The chairs scraped back. The room began to empty. I didn't rush. I packed up my folder slowly, left the visitor badge on the table, and walked out without a backward glance. Because sometimes, the loudest statement you can make is arriving last and leaving first. The ocean was still black when I poured my coffee and stepped out onto the terrace of the suite they hadn't booked for me. A competitor had. One I'd been quietly speaking with since before Gavin ever decided I was expendable. Theirs was a quiet operation, leaner, hungrier, more deliberate. They understood the value of architecture before the drywall went up. They understood me. Inside, my inbox was glowing. The first email was from Carver's office. Consulting agreement finalized. 12-month retainer. Terms as discussed. Welcome aboard. The second, more surprising, was from Baring Klein's lead counsel. We'd like to formalize a second agreement. Independent review. Strategic clause oversight. Discretion guaranteed. Two sides of a once brittle battlefield now bent toward the same architect. The one they left at the gate. I leaned against the railing, watching the early light smear itself across the horizon. It looked less like a sunrise and more like a slow reveal. The sky remembering itself. Behind me, a soft chime sounded. Message from internal HR. Gavin Barrett has been placed on indefinite personal leave. Interim leadership will be assigned. Please direct all contract correspondence to legal and compliance. Personal leave. That's what they call it when you've been publicly disarmed but allowed to keep your shoes on. They didn't fire him. Not outright. But they pulled him off the project, took his teeth, and left him to chew on corporate platitudes in some off-site HR retreat where they hand out stress balls and talk about leadership recalibration. I opened the final copy of the revised MSA. Scrolled to the bottom. There it was, the last clause I'd embedded not as a legal necessity, but as a mirror. All continuity and enforceability shall reside solely with the original author, whose identity is legally embedded in the compliance header. Simple. Unshakable. And now, publicly codified. I whispered it once aloud. Not to hear it, but to feel it. To taste what it meant. Then I closed the document, finished my coffee, and slid the balcony door shut behind me. They left me at the gate. But I wrote the map. Now they rent the compass, from me.